First of all, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of JavaScript Live, which is obviously part of our wider live series here at Amicus, where we connect engineers with industry experts with the goal of bringing everyone closer together. Now, these sessions are designed to be as interactive as possible, so if anyone has any questions for Ahsan throughout, please do use the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen, and I'll make sure that once we get to the end of the presentation that all of those questions are answered. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by Google developer expert and head instructor architect and SALT, Ahsan Ayaz. So Ahsan's going to be giving us a presentation today on how developers can build their personal brand online. So I think without further ado, Ahsan, I'll hand over to you and let you get things underway.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jamie. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to be here. It's a new community for me, so I think I'm excited to connect with all of you, and yeah, hopefully would be able to answer some questions and also would shed some light based on my experience so far, and from the experience from the other people. So I think I'm just gonna start sharing my screen, and we'll take it from there. Alrighty, let's see if I can get this one correctly. Cool. And I would just want to go ahead and do this. Awesome. So you should be able to see my screen, right? Awesome. Cool. So today's topic is I am a developer and you can't see me. And the reason for this title is we have a lot of good developers, but there are a lot of recruiters that can't really see you, and that is the inspiration for the title. So one of the things that I really learned about the slides and the techniques is how to create great presentation slides. And when I go and share people, they're usually amazed at what they see, but sometimes they're like, what are you really trying to do? Not showing us anything. But then the question becomes, why should you really care about this talk? Or why should you listen to me? Or why am I here really? And one of the reasons is because after a lot of years of experience, I was finally able to have Google recognize me. And by Google, I mean YouTube. And YouTube started showing me relevant videos like, hey, why should not everybody code? And that really shows how much they believe in me, that, yeah, they have started recommending me this. But yeah, let's ignore that for a while. So why should you care about this talk? A quick introduction. I'm a Google developers expert. And by that, I mean that Google acknowledges that I'm an expert in Angular for the past couple of years. And I'm also an author of a worldwide published book called the Angular Cookbook that is having a 4.4 rating on Amazon. And we have had more than 1,500 copies sold in the past year. And people are loving this. And now I'm starting to work on the second edition of it. So it's amazing. It's an amazing experience. So what is a Google developers expert? It's essentially a program by Google which contains a lot of experts from throughout the world. So what you see here is an event that happened in Germany, in Berlin, last month, and all the experts gathered there. And this was an event specifically for the experts throughout the world, especially for Europe, because Europe comprises of 1/3 of the entire experts by Google. And Google basically acknowledges us so we can spread out the words of the Google technologies, and we can be there for you when you need help with a particular Google tech. For example, if you have any questions about Angular, you can always reach out to me. And what I get in return is I get a profile in Google or developers.google.com. And I also get a lot of perks when it comes to being a part of this community. But the best thing that I love about being an expert is that I get to work with the Google teams, for example, not on a daily basis, but we get to give feedback really quick before things go out in public. So we can work basically with them, providing feedback and then just giving out comments and trying out different things. One of the things that I would like to highlight is the open source contributions. And I'm going to talk about this later as well. But essentially, one of the libraries that I created a couple of years ago, it just crossed 8.6 million installs. And only on GitHub, there are more than 3,500 projects using that. And off GitHub, we don't really know, but it's amazing to see a lot of people contributing to this and also a lot of developers using that. So now the question becomes, why should you have an online presence as a developer? Is just being a good developer not really enough in this case? And if we have a look at the world as a holistic view, or even your city as a holistic view, you'll see that there are many developers, and it's really easy to just get lost inside of the recruiters on who to pick in this case when you look at from a recruiter's perspective. And then, There are just layoffs everywhere. You hear about it all the time. It's still not stopping. It started with the big companies, but now there are small companies also doing it. And then there is a challenge of standing out as a developer. And it's really interesting on how one could convince a recruiter that you are really good. So what is the goal really in this case? If you summarize it, it is to get people convinced that you are an amazing developer. It is also a goal to quickly have the recruiters see that you're a good match, and also having a good portfolio. So when we talk about portfolio, the question is, what is it really? If I summarize it, it is the gateway on the recruiter's heart. So essentially, your portfolio is the only thing that is your selling document. Even before you get into the interview phase, it essentially showcases your skills before that step. And a lot of people actually sort of get out of the pipeline even before that happens. And we all know that developers are lazy. And I can say that because I am a developer. So if we talk about how developers really apply to the jobs, most of the times it's exactly the same way. You try to push your CVs as much as possible to all the emails. You have the same sort of email, or not email, but even CV template. You have the same cover letter. They're the same words that I'm passionate, blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of things that are exactly the same. And then the recruiters see that and they cannot really identify, all right, which person do I choose? So we have more jobs available in the market, which means there are more people, which means there's more competition. And the people who are going to make it would be who are winning this competition, so to say. It's a sad reality, but it is there. So then the reality becomes, if you got the skills, not really, if you can showcase your skills, that is what is going to take you to the next step. And this can start your asynchronous search to finding jobs. And this would put you ahead in this case. Talking about asynchronous stuff, let's talk about JavaScript. So we have a question here that is, if you parse int a value that is 0.6, what would it be the output? That would be 6. If we do a parse int of 9, what would be the output? It would be 9. If we try to do a parse int of 0.000005, could you type in the chat? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to say what would be the output in this case. What do you think? So I'm going to count to 10 in my head, and then I'm going to reveal what that is. Let's go.
I really hope you're not expecting me to answer that one, Ahsan. I'll leave that down to the chat.
No pressure at all. No. Alrighty, time's up. The answer is 5. What? You might have thought that it would be 0, but it's not. And that's one of the reasons why we love and hate JavaScript. So let's talk about your LinkedIn profile. And the reality is that when you start building something, no matter what it is, you love it, right? And you might also love your LinkedIn profile, and you should. But the reality is a lot of recruiters are overwhelmed by a lot of these profiles. For example, let's take an example that a recruiter is trying to go ahead and is looking for someone with the following skills. We have Node.js, full stack developer, React, Google Cloud Platform, and then they go to your profile and they see something like this. We have software developer, period, nothing else. And then what happens is the recruiter moves to the next profile. And it's sad because that first impression could have led you to the next step. But let's suppose that the recruiter said, all right, no, let's look at the profile more. Let's go to the about section and see. And there you have the very generic message that is, I'm a passionate software engineer. I would love to join your company and I would love to grow with you. But the thing is, if you have the profile like that, don't, please. The thing is, if you have your headline and your about that can showcase who you are, what you are doing right now, and where are you going forward? What are your plans? What are your ambitions? Those are the important things that you should have in your headline and in your about section. In short, you should showcase your skills and your passion. At this point, let's say the recruiter goes ahead and tries to read your about, and you have a bad about section, then what you're trying to say is you're trying to have the recruiter put more efforts than required. And in that particular case, if you have a lot of generic information, then you are actually saying to the recruiter, all right, please click the see more button. Don't ever have them click the see more button. Your first headline in the about should be saying who you are and where you're going forward. If the recruiters are still desperate for candidates, then essentially they're looking for, when did you start a set of technologies? What skill set do you have? Are you still using them? And have you been consistent? So that's the thing they would like to see from your LinkedIn profile, and not just from your heading and your about, but also some other sections as well. And we're going to talk about that. So what should you really do? In the first headline, you should define your basic skills, or what you're most comfortable in, because most of the questions, if you make it up to the interview section, it's going to be from this headline because you have mentioned this on top. Make it easy for them, please, because then the process goes faster. You have a much better chance for being successful. And let's say that the recruiters saw your profile and now you're shortlisted, which means that you've got the most boxes ticked. You have a good about section, you had a good headline, so you're doing pretty good. But then the game of prioritization starts. And by that, I mean that you're probably at the mercy of some people that we call the preferred candidates. And the preferred candidates are the ones who have got most of the boxes ticked. And then you can go forward if they decide not to join the company, or there's some mismatch in the process, and then you get. So the question is, what more can you do to have your LinkedIn profile stand out? The first thing is the activity section. Journal your coding journey. Whatever you're learning, just share about it. If you're creating some projects, share about those projects. If you're learning something new, share about that. If you found some aha moment that, all right, this thing I didn't really know about, then it's quite possible that other people at your level don't know about that same thing as well. So better to share it. You can create really small posts. You don't have to write a whole essay or a whole blog post on LinkedIn, but just really small posts that could get you into the LinkedIn algorithm. And then talk about how fun it is, what you do daily. If you're learning something, talk about how cool it is. How do you feel when you're able to solve problems, for example. And then the best thing that you can do is to provide value to others by educating, because one of the things that I've learned in my career is that the best way to learn for me is to educate other people, because then I get to learn more things by jumping more in depth onto the topics and a wide range of those topics then. So if you talk about summarizing all of those, in short, for LinkedIn, you're going to be clear on what tech stack you're using. You're not going to make the recruiters, go more into the steps and make it difficult for them to find the information that they need. And then you're going to do your best to just pass this pre-interview phase and show your passion. In reality, it's awesome if you can show that you don't just work with tech, you live and breathe it. And that means that you're passionate about it. I have taken a lot of interviews in Klarna when I worked for about 2.5 years, or actually 2 years. In just 1 year, I took more than 90 interviews. And a lot of those interviews were looking at the technical capabilities, but then for some juniors, it was also seeing how passionate they are and how they try to approach different problems. So if you can show that in the pre-interview process, that's amazing. So your profile, your CV doesn't have to be really fancy. You don't have to have a great template. My CV right now is a really simple Google Doc, nothing fancy around that, just pure, simple information. So it has to be convincing. It has to show what you think the recruiters are looking for. And just spending time on that and thinking about that is going to be interesting and helpful for you. Now let's talk about GitHub profiles. Does anybody know this person? So Dan Abramov is the person who invented or who created basically Redux, and it was a really small library. And as far as I know, he did it when he was about 23 years old. And now if you go and look at the GitHub profile, you're going to see that he has about 80,000 followers on GitHub, which I would say is more than like 5 million followers on Instagram or Facebook, for example, because nobody follows anyone on GitHub at all. And you see that the repositories that are highlighted here is React. We have React.js org. It would also include, I don't know, maybe Redux as well. And then there's this poor profile. It's not so great as Dan, but I still got about 700 followers or something. But this is really helpful for me because I never had to send my CV to anyone. All I do is I just share my GitHub. And if someone then asks, then I share my CV, but I don't have to push my CV to anyone because any technical lead or architect can just go there, see the repositories that I've worked with, and can analyze, all right, this person has this level of code. For example, as I mentioned, one of the libraries, for example, the NGX device detector, which got more than 8.5 million installs, it has about 460 stars. And trust me, nobody gives the stars to any repositories unless they really, really like the technology or they're getting benefited from it. So just having these repositories, and they don't have to be as big. Even if you have something small, but that's valuable, I think that's really going to be helpful. And what you see here at the bottom is this chart. The darker the green color is on GitHub, you might already know that the more contributions that you have made those days. So if you have this sort of greenish, then that's a good sign that you are active, doing open source contributions or creating issues or whatever, but this is a bonus. So what do you need to have on your GitHub? You can have side projects. And the reality is that side projects need time, they need effort, and they need drive. And then you have to keep yourself motivated about this. All these efforts are same as if you want to go to the gym to lose weight or to be more fit. And then you have to have your motivation. There's nobody who can really come and motivate you to get out of bed and then go to the gym. You have to put efforts into that. Same goes for all these efforts that I'm talking about. And one of the fun part is that I shared this meme in 2022, and that is, I know a place for a lot of devs, and that's going to be localhost. And I think everybody understands that because we create a lot of projects, they end up in localhost, never make it to production, but still it's fun. And if you're sharing that journey, then that's going to be very powerful. So one of the things is to-do apps are not enough. I've seen a lot of candidates. I've taken a lot of interviews of the candidates which come up with really simple applications on GitHub. And the problem is, if I see that for every candidate I'm interviewing, I'm just going to not find it significant. I'm not going to find it helpful because everybody's following tutorials. They're able to make it while working with the tutorials, but what have they added on top of it? For example, so from your GitHub projects, the ideal thing that you can show really is you've got the skills for a particular tech stack, especially the one that the recruiter is looking for. You've worked with other people. That also shows team collaboration and being able to really work with others, because it's not easy. Not everyone has the capacity to listen for positive criticism and to improve their code when they're asked to implement tests and whatnot. But if you've done that, that's a really good sign. And then you have worked on a large project. This is an amazing opportunity. If you start working on open source projects, you can work on really big projects even without being hired by a company. And that is amazing. That's going to give you so much exposure and so much experience if you try to do that. And then you work with create coding standards. And that's the same thing. If you work with large scale projects, if you work with significant libraries, even if you start really small, you don't have to jump into, for example, React or Angular and start contributing to that. You can start with small libraries, but then you'll grow, because when you see others code, other standards, you basically learn from it. And that is the idea of open source. So open source contributions are important. There's a CSS pun here that is intended. But let's talk about the ideal process. So let's say, imagine that the recruiter reads your CV, they find you interesting, they ask for your GitHub from you, then you give them the GitHub link, then they go to your GitHub, check out your project, read the code, and they're blown away. The reality is that it doesn't happen. That's not the case. So nobody's gonna ask you for your GitHub unless they find you interesting. And how do they find you interesting? Again, LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn and use the activity tab, start posting about your projects. If you push a commit that adds a new feature to your dummy project, or if you have built a to-do app, but made it your own, if you have created something that's useful for everybody, or if it's fun, you just share about that on LinkedIn. So share about what you've built, share about what challenges you have faced, share about what you enjoyed in the whole process, and then keep it short. As I said, you don't have to write a blog post, but just small updates. and have an active GitHub profile. You don't have to have a perfect GitHub profile that is huge projects, huge contributions. You don't have to have that. As long as you're actively building something, and you're building something meaningful, not just the tutorials, but something on top of it, maybe change the styles, add a bunch of feature, think about what you can add to it more that could make it useful. I think that's going to be really good. So small contributions like fixing typos, creating issues, picking good first issues. So GitHub has a feature that you can filter different repositories and issues by this label called good first issue. And once you do so, you can start picking up those really small and easier tasks, and then you can start contributing. And that's really good for portfolio. Finally, when you're creating a lot of projects, one of the biggest mistakes that people usually do is they don't create a good README file, and that sort of bounces back. The READMEs mostly have, all right, how do you start a project, blah, 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 but it doesn't tell anything about how and why did you create this project, essentially. So I'm going to show you some examples. For example, a good README example, and I'm also going to show a bad README example. And the fun part is that both of them are my projects. So let's look at the bad README example. This is the bad README example. There is no README at all. So this is a project that I created for a YouTube video, and that's why I didn't really need a README, because anyone who follows can follow this. But I should probably still add a good README to this. But let's talk about this project, which crossed the X amount of million installs. So you can see we got a logo here. We have a bunch of badges that the builds are passing. We have the NPM version. We have the downloads. It crossed 8.8 million now. And now it has all the dependencies. How would you install it? This is an example of using this library into your project. And I also think we had some sort of credits to other libraries that I got inspiration from, and the license and whatnot. So all the information that the developers really need to work with this library is there. And that is an example of a good README. But there are also a lot of other READMEs that you could use. For example, this one has a lot of things. For example, you could find like this. So this is a really great README example. So I'm going to share the slides link with Jamie, and then you can also access all of these links on your own and kind of see, all right, how do you make a really great README? Okay, so then if I move forward, the thing is, if you build something using a tutorial, it's good that it teaches you stuff, so don't be shy about it. A lot of people ask me, is it good to build things with tutorial or not? I'd say it's always good that you do it, but you add more features to it. Think about more features, how you can make this useful, how you can make it your own, change the styles, add a new font size. For example, if you go and see any of my applications, you're going to see that all of my applications have the same font that I'm using even in the slide. For example, I could go to, let's say, if I can go to Ayaz, and I think it's NG2048, if I'm not wrong. Nope, that's going to be code with Ahsan. Yeah, so look at this one. It has the same font called Nunito as the slides, and this is just a rendition of the 2048 game that you sort of combine those blocks and then make it your own. And then, once you get a 2048 block, you win. I could also go to, for example, app.flashback.com. This is another game that I built to use it during a hackathon. You're going to see that this has the same font as this one. So you try to make it your own. You try to give it your flavor, your colors, your font size, whatever you can do to make it your own. So that would be my recommendation. And then deploy your application. For example, I just showed you two examples, NG2048 and Flashback. I have this portfolio because they are deployed. I can share that in my resume. I can share that with on LinkedIn to get more traction. So try to do that. And then also add these links to your LinkedIn, but also on your CV, so you can show them. And LinkedIn also has this feature where on your profile, there's a featured section. So you can put your important projects on the featured section. So when a recruiter goes by your profile, they can also see that. So that's going to be really helpful. And then also finally, there's also something called the media section. So if you go to the media section, that essentially shows a bunch of media that you could use. For example, I could show you this. So this is the media section. In which, or under your experience section, you're going to see that I have multiple things here, but in each experience section, you also have this media that you could add. So I have like 63 media that is different videos, different articles that I've developed, and I put that under the Google Developers Expert case. So you can go and edit here, and then you can add media from here. You can add a link, upload media, and then it gets shown to your profile. And that is an amazing thing to show as the recruiter might want to see. So after having said all of this, the question becomes, am I making all this up? Is this really, does this really work? Is it worth all this effort? And the fact is, I could be lying. Do I have any data to prove that? And I have one example of a really cool guy from Pakistan. I know this person personally. His name is Saad, and he developed something really nice. And you can see the fun thing is he has more followers than me. I'm not jealous at all. Maybe I am, but this person, being so young, got a lot of followers, got a lot of traction because he built some projects and worked on that. One of the things that he worked on was a developer portfolio project that I can show you quickly if I can find it. So, hey Saad, where are you? There you are. So if I show you the developer folio, it looks something like this. So he built a portfolio website creator for developers as a template, and any developer can just go copy this, make their own site, add open source projects, big project, blah blah blah. It's really amazing, and he puts time in this project and keeps improving this. So this is one of the projects. He also created another really good project that was React blog GitHub, and that was also really nice because you could create a blog just by using Markdown and GitHub issues in this case. So let's talk about what really happened. So when I asked Saad, how did you get so many jobs? Because I knew he got a lot of offers from a lot of companies in Pakistan, and they wanted him to join because he was getting so popular in the community. So he said that he said, I kept posting about my GitHub projects on LinkedIn, gave a lot of talks in different conferences, got recognized in the communities and among companies. He also said that recruiters may not know me, but software engineers would recognize me most of the times. And that's really powerful because then it makes it easier for him to get into any company. And one of the cool things that he shared was that Clever Programmer, which is a really famous YouTube channel, I think it has about 1.5 million subs now. They used the developer folio project that I just showed you in a closed group where they were teaching someone and asking the developers to create their own portfolio. And Kenzie Dodds, who is really famous in the React community as an educator and tutor, tweeted about the React blog GitHub that I also showed you. And after that tweet, he got a lot of followers, a lot of traction. And this is just because he put a lot of time into creating those things that are helpful to others. So all the best things happen along with his projects being trending on GitHub. And that is something that you can also do if you put more time into it. I never got the time, but he did. Now, can we talk about more data? I do have a group of Pakistanis in Europe, and I asked them, hey, did you get any jobs after using LinkedIn or GitHub essentially? And I got a lot of responses. Someone said, hey, it really helps. Someone's class fellow started writing articles on Medium, and that helped. Some people said, all right, I kept my GitHub profile really up to date, and that helped me get into BMW. And then also a lot of data is here from a lot of people. And then there was someone, I think when I created this slide, at the same day, I got this recruiter reaching out for a role in Sweden. And that has happened a lot. I mean, I get offers almost every second day, at least one. So yeah, that happens. When you keep your LinkedIn up to date, when you keep your GitHub up to date, when you keep being active in the community. And one of the things that when you become a bit senior, or even if you get good at some technology, you could start doing is to answer questions on Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow, surprise, surprise, is not just a place for questions, it's also a place for answers. So for example, here you see at the top, this is something that I'm getting more reputation for something that I answered, I don't know, years ago. So even people go back to those questions, and if you have given answers, you get reputation. This is really good because this also adds to your portfolio that, hey, this person knows stuff because he's able to answer a lot of questions. So now the question is, how do we get in the habit of maintaining an online presence? So there are a couple of tips that I want to give you. First of all, network with a lot of people. You can start with me. You can find me on GitHub and you can follow. I think you can become one of the cool people who are following me. I think it's about 700 people now. You can also find me on Twitter. So take a screenshot, or Jamie's going to send you the slides. But then also find a mentor. Having a mentor really helps you grow forward. Find someone who's senior. I know that a lot of people, they are not really able to help one-to-one, but even if you ask small questions and you're able to communicate those questions, even via messages, it's really helpful. For example, I have my LinkedIn always open. I have my Facebook always open. I have about 17,000 followers on Facebook, and there comes a lot of questions every time. And as soon as I get a chance, I reply to them. I ask everybody to just send questions in detail, so I don't have to keep following up with them by hi and hello and then the questions. But find a mentor who can help you with those questions. A lot of times you're confused. All right, do I learn this or that, or I have this as a plan for the next year, is it good, which technologies are good in the market, blah blah blah. So find a mentor, and I think that's going to help you a lot. And you can also grow an audience. You're going to see this new trend on LinkedIn for the past, I don't know, 6 to 7 months, that people are starting to share PDFs, which end up as carousels on LinkedIn. And they're sharing small information like 5 JavaScript array methods, or how would you use loops in JavaScript, or about Flutter, animations in Flutter. So a lot of people are sharing some videos of the projects that they're creating. A lot of people are just educating with single images, or even PDFs or carousels. So you can grow an audience. And I know a lot of youngsters who are doing this, and they grow a lot of audience, having, I don't know, thousands of followers. So you can also do that if you want to push up your level, and then work on the stuff that you can really show. And as I said, follow tutorials, that's fine, but just add a lot of stuff to it, add a lot of features. That's not only going to, help you get the eye of recruiters, but also it's going to teach you a lot. So you are really eligible, you get strong, you get skilled as you add those things to whatever you're building. And finally, yeah, just create a good GitHub. Try to have projects that you can pin to your GitHub profile. Try to make it green as much as possible. Try to look into small open source contributions and whatnot. And then promote yourself, share your achievements. It doesn't matter how big or small they are. If you have learned even this tiny little thing, for example, you learned something about CSS animations, just share about that. Create a little demo, deploy it, and share it so everybody can go and see it. In your demos, you can always have this link at the top that, hey, start my repository. If your projects on GitHub are present, they're deployed, and people have started them, that means that you're creating cool things, and eventually you become good at it. And yes, use the power of social media. One of the things that I would encourage you to ask yourself when trying to find jobs is, why should a company hire you in this case? One of the reasons is because they're hiring, but apart from that, why should they hire you? What do you bring to the table? If you join a company, it's sort of a win-win situation for both sides. The company should be able to tell you how they can help you grow, but then you should be able to also analyze how you can help the company grow. It could be as minor as, hey, they need a junior developer to work on some of the things that the seniors can't do at the moment, or they're busy in some projects. That's perfectly fine, but you should know what you're bringing to the table, and then how you can help the company grow, because that's your selling point, and that's going to be always your selling point, even when you grow within the company. Even after, for example, an yearly cycle where you have to reevaluate, ask for a raise, you would have to know how you're helping the company, and why should you get the raise in this case. And always remember, it's not always nice to fix things on production, so don't do that. Debug on development, fix on development, and then push to production. Otherwise, yeah, it's going to be like this. So with that, I think I would like to thank you and Jamie for this opportunity. I hope this was insightful, it was helpful, and I'm going to be open for any questions from now. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Ahsan. We've had a couple of questions come through over the presentation. So first of all, from Anonymous, has firstly said shout out to Saad. So thank you very much for that. But as well, asking if there's any things outside of what you've discussed today, maybe that don't require you to be as online present or on social media, that can help you get recognized.
I mean, there are a couple of things, because it really depends on what kind of companies are you targeting. So for example, if I talk about, for example, Facebook or Google, you can be a really good engineer, but you will not get past the interview process if you don't do what they require. That is lead code, a lot of data structures and algorithms, just knowing all of them. Otherwise, because when you get into interview for these companies, you pretty much have to work offline, as in they give you a tool where you can't really Google, you cannot debug, you cannot compile your code, and you just have to write code that should somehow work. And that's just because the companies try to look for that. And same goes with other companies. So I think there's no single answer to anything. All the techniques that I've shared is something that sort of applied to a global scale and would increase the chances. I'm not saying that this would definitely get you hired, because after all of this, even you would have to see, all right, what is the company doing right now? What kind of projects do they work on? So you have to do a research on that. What kind of interviews do they take in this case? If you can find that information either from an existing employee or someone that you know, or from the recruiter. A lot of times the recruiter also help you in just telling, all right, this could be the way they could ask you a question, not exactly the questions, but this could be the pattern in this case. And just knowing those is, because just getting to the other side of the interview is really tough in this case, and it's on a case-by-case basis. So I think apart from having the online presence, even if you don't want to be really social or come out, create videos or talk about this, I think if you just go and try to contribute to open source projects on GitHub, that's more than enough. I know a lot of people who contribute to a lot of projects, but they're not really social or don't come out as much. But then when you're trying to apply for a company, then only your GitHub projects can be really, really strong in this case. So I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Shahid has asked that he's mentioned that he's faced 2 companies offering geo salaries after months of tests. How can he avoid them? I've not heard of geo salaries before, so I was hoping that's something that maybe you'd heard of.
I'm not really sure. So it says after months of tests. That's interesting. I don't think I understand the question, Shahid. Could you clarify a bit, and then I can answer it?
Yeah, thank you, Shahid. We'll come back to that one in a second. Florian has said, do you need to wait until you have some years of experience in order to get solid interviews?
I don't think so, Florian. I mean, you can start as early as possible. The thing is, if you want to start giving interviews, just keep the expectations that it's okay if you're not going to make it. That's the problem that I see a lot of people face with. So if you go in early and you expect that, all right, I'm going to clear it, and then you don't, then you get a lot of disappointment in this case, and then you don't apply anymore. So if you're not doing that, you can start as early as possible. Just go ahead and try to learn, for example, something basic, and then you can start. The thing is, what is your intention in this case? So you can start giving interviews early as well. But I think once you get a good grasp, then even it's going to take you a couple of interviews to get better at it. You're going to find some mistake here, some mistake there. For example, one of the recent experiences I had was with TopTel. I have a habit of just giving interviews after a couple of months, so I can reevaluate myself. I can see, all right, what these people are really asking. And I was asked given a problem that could only be solved with or could only be solved effectively with a single algorithm, and I had no algorithm practice for like months. And I failed it. My solution was working, but it wasn't efficient to work on the large data set. So the most of the tests were failing, and then that's okay. So if you go with that mindset, I think you can go as early as you want.
Amazing. Just waiting on. Okay, so Shahid has just clarified they offer salaries less for candidates from countries like Pakistan. I didn't know this recently, but found out that companies are doing this. It's a bit,
I mean,
yeah,
that's a bit sad. I think I myself found out that as well at some point, and it sucks. I think there are different companies who do it. There are different companies who don't. It also, I think, depends on different countries do also have these regulations that you can really, you can really challenge that why are you doing this? You can have a lawyer and then ask them. But then some people shy away from this, that like it's a lot of work and you don't want to put efforts into it. So I would say if there's a company which really does that, then I think it's just better to leave the company. It's not worth the time and the efforts, to be honest. But yeah, I know that there are different situations. I've been in the situation myself. So the goal was just leaving the company in that case.
Yeah, I was just about to totally agree with you. I think that's the one of the biggest red flags you can come across. So as difficult as it is to find opportunities, if that is happening, then yeah, definitely a big red flag and an avoidance. So Anonymous again has asked, is there a checklist of complexities that recruiters will look for that we can compare to our personal projects to see if we meet that metric?
That's a good question. I think when it comes to complexity, it would really depend on what kind of role you're applying for. For example, I can give you an example of the interviews I've taken of juniors versus seniors. For example, if it's a junior, I would look mostly into to what extent the junior has worked on his stuff, and then I would ask questions about, all right, could you share me where this happens, or how do, for example, if that's a React application, I would ask, where do you manage the state? How do you make the API calls? How do you structure your code in this case? But then if it's an architect or a senior developer, then the questions are different. Then it's mostly towards architecture, or how would you lay down your platform in that case? How would you make sure there's no single point of failure, for example? How would you handle scalability? Where would you deploy all of your platform in this case? So I think it would depend on the role that you're applying for, but it could be, and it also depends on who's asking the question. Sometimes it's not so senior people who ask the question. Sometimes there are CTOs who ask the question. So I think it varies. But I think if you're a junior developer, they would really look into to what extent you have pushed your limits to build an app that's really useful. And if you have understood the end-to-end goal of, or the end-to-end flow, and you know what you have done in this case. So I think that's what I would use. In some of the cases, it's really hard because some interviews are really good, some interviews are really bad. So it could depend on who's asking the question. And even from one company, there could be different experiences of different interviews.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Another question come through from Florin, has asked what the best way is to work for companies outside of your country. Something that I'm happy to contribute to as well, but Ahsan, obviously you know a lot more about it than I probably do.
Yeah, I think so. As I said, LinkedIn is pretty global. There are different techniques to use LinkedIn for this. So, for example, start sharing different information. One of the tips and tricks I understood was just looking at different companies where you would want to apply. So the thing is, you can't go and with a strategy that, hey, I'm gonna just post and then recruiters would come out at me. It would be rather, all right, these are the companies I want to target. Then you look into what kind of content they post. I mean, if you want to be really sneaky, you could also try using the same hashtags as they are doing, and then you may end up in the same timeline. That's also quite possible. And if you want to be more sneaky, you could also just use LinkedIn ads and then definitely reach out to their profile. No, I'm just kidding. So I would say that LinkedIn, and then there's Indeed.com, and then there are different websites of different countries that you could target. For example, for me, what I tried doing when I was working in Pakistan is I did reach out. I actually kept my LinkedIn quite up to date. I did use Indeed.com and then read.co.uk and a bunch of other websites where I did upload my CV. But fortunately, I was just reached out by recruiters because I had a really strong LinkedIn and then a really strong GitHub. So LinkedIn worked for me overall, but I would say you can also try different sites. But Jamie, you also wanted to contribute.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with those ones. In terms of looking for remote opportunities as well, I can send out some links along with your slides on the email tomorrow. And when it actually comes to being hired by that business, there's things like remote.com, Let's Deal, that are actually able to physically employ you, for example, if you are based in Pakistan or other parts of Europe or whatever it may be. So perfect. And Anonymous has asked, along with a GitHub and a website, a LinkedIn and a Twitter, is there anything else that you'd recommend? I mean, there's plenty of options there, to be fair, but anything else?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you don't have to go like all in on all the social media. I would say if you have just the LinkedIn and GitHub, I think it's more than enough. The thing is, the goal is not to really have a lot of social media accounts or to have a lot of presence. The goal is, how can you convince the recruiter in the least amount of time that you're really good? You could even do it with just your CV. If it's good enough, if it has projects, if it has the necessary information that reflects that you're good for the company. So you don't even need the social platforms in this case. But I would say that if you're just starting out, then LinkedIn and a good GitHub, and just having that filled with a bunch of projects and a bunch of activity that is relevant for the recruiters to see according to what they're searching for or who they're searching for would be more than enough. You don't really need a Twitter. I have a lot of accounts. I have a Twitter, Reddit, I have a TikTok, I have, I don't know, so many accounts, but I don't really use all of them, to be honest. I mostly use my LinkedIn, my YouTube, and also my Facebook. So those are the ones that I use a lot.
Perfect. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask as well, just before we wrap up, when speaking to junior developers, a lot of the time, something that I advise them is that if, for example, they have been learning JavaScript, they've maybe done a boot camp such as Salt or something similar to that, and they market themselves maybe as like a full stack developer with a huge list of skills, I always tend to recommend them to kind of stick to one particular part of a stack or one particular technology and try and master that before trying to present themselves as like a jack of all trades. Essentially, I just want to know whether I've been telling people the wrong thing or whether maybe that's something you agree with.
No, I absolutely agree. I remember that from my first company, I had a really good senior who was a software architect back then. And he gave me an advice that there are two different things. There, you can either be a master of one or you can be a jack of all trades. And he suggested me that I'm going to suggest you the third type, and that is master of more than one. So you can become master of more than one, but if you get into anything at all and you want to be a master, you would have to put either 10,000 hours on that, or you would just go ahead and spend like a year on it. And that advice actually got stuck with me. I consider myself as an Angular expert. I started my internship as an Angular engineer or a web developer who had to look into Angular and to teach the seniors how it works, because we started with Flash back then and ActionScript, and the first goal was to teach them how do we convert this into HTML5 with Angular. And till now, I work with Angular. I'm an Angular Google Developers expert. I'm an Angular books author. So I kept this one thing as a mastery, and then I keep exploring a little things here and there, but I never lose my focus on what my strength is, and that is essentially Angular. And if I broaden it a bit, then that's front end. So even though I'm a full stack software architect, I tend to still focus more on front end. So you're absolutely spot on that instead of having like 10 things in your CV, it's good to have like, this is what I'm an expert in, or just say, all right, I am a, let's say, back-end focused full stack engineer, which means now they can be more precise, because a person who has 10 years of experience and 1 year of experience in everything is probably not going to be really good as an expert in any sort of project in that case. So yeah, you're pretty spot on.
Perfect. All right, thank you very much. We've not had any more questions come through, I don't believe. Let me just double check. One final one here. Do you recommend doing freelance projects and putting that on your resume?
Yeah, absolutely. I would recommend that. If you can get freelance projects, this is something that people find a bit hard to do, but if you can get freelance projects, then absolutely you can put on your resume. I would recommend that.
Perfect. Okay, brilliant. Well, so thank you everyone for joining, and obviously a massive thank you to Ahsan for the presentation and for such an intriguing talk. So what I wanted to say now was just, if there is anyone that's watching at the moment and wants to do something similar to what Ahsan has done today and give a talk on a presentation on a topic that he's really passionate about, just let me know. And obviously, as Ahsan mentioned before as well, if you have any questions for him about anything that we've discussed today, anything that you'd like advice on, he's obviously happy to answer those questions. If there's anything maybe a little bit softer to do with recruitment stuff that you'd like to ask me as well, feel free to message at any time. But Ahsan, thank you again for giving up your time to do this talk, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
No problem at all. Speak to you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye. Have a good one.